welcome back. I hope it's not your first time with my channel, but just in case, my name is Joanna. It's a pleasure to meet you. And this is my very amazing idea where fantastic people around the world meet with me and we talk. Well, talk about what? About different topics. So, of course, many of them will be close to Agile and Scrum, but as you probably know me, it will be most likely something that will broaden our perspectives on many different aspects of our world. So, today, my lovely guest is Leslie Morse. And how did we meet? Well, Leslie is my first contact point at scrum.org. So whenever I have to talk, I call Leslie. So she's my person. And I also recently learned that Leslie is working on a super valuable and interesting topic. And I'm already looking forward to that conversation. So, Leslie, if you had only one chance in this world to introduce yourself to everyone, what would you say about yourself?
What would I say about myself? Ooh, I was not prepared for that question because that is a very, very powerful question. Um, I'm Leslie Morse, and if I were a superhero, I would be Joy Max. And my superpowers would be that I bring infectious joy to the world, I have endless energy, and I have calorie rejection powers so that I can eat all the amazing food in the world and not actually intake the calories. Um, and I say that like this superhero idea because we all have our inner superhero. And if we tap into that, I think it just helps us all make the world a little bit of a better place, which is kind of what I want my legacy to be, which oddly is related to the topic that we're going to get into around change today, because I think change can be so hard, and thinking differently about change can make the world a little bit of a better place.
That's a powerful start. So now, yeah, everyone, we want to make the world a better place. And we hope this conversation is one step that will help us move forward into that direction. So, speaking about change, Leslie, what originally drew you to this field, the field of change, the field of change management? Well, one can Google that. This is a pretty popular topic right now.
Yeah, change is, especially as agilists, and is all around us all the time. Even if we don't consider ourselves agilists or connected to the agile community at all, change is something we deal with all the time. I had a startup in college. We did digital marketing. And then I got involved with a custom website and custom software development sort of stuff that led me into my first real job when I kind of left the startup world. I joined a company called Lowe's Home Improvement here in the United States as a business analyst. I didn't even know that business analysis was a thing, let alone there was something called the IIBA, or the International Institute of Business Analysis, that allowed you to study and get really good at what business analysis was. And so that was my first real professional geeking out moment, beyond like the study and the work that I did in undergrad with a business degree. And change came up there for me for the first time. And then it became, I learned about Agile and how do we transition or change from traditional ways of working in that e-commerce group of about 300 people into more agile ways of working, and how do you effectively lead those kind of transitions and things. And all of it was called change management. And what I've found about myself is that, and I think it's the unique thing about a lot of people that identify as kind of classic business analysts, is we're those human connector people that bridge the gap between kind of those that do and those that want. We help the language and translation and all of these things. And I think even before I had the words to put towards traditional change management approaches, I was looking at change in a way of something like, we've just got to figure out how to make this as easy and seamless as possible, versus something that's very controlled and disciplined and rigorous. So I've done that time kind of studying the like pro-sci and other change management bodies of knowledge around what traditional approaches to change management look like. But that was kind of that origin story of how I got interested in change and all of that in the very beginning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we know your story. We know why the word change is important for you in your professional career. And based on your current knowledge and experience, how would you explain the concept of change management to someone new to the topic?
If we want to just classically think about change management, I think edge theory, which is rooted in Arnie Mendel's work, is kind of the best way to break it down, and was one of the resonant ways for me to really think about change, not in a simplistic way, but actually a more sophisticated, systemic way. And I like this edge theory model because while it is more systemic and sophisticated, it's very simple to explain and understand. So change, and the great thing is we've got a video podcast here. So it's like, if you think about like a triangle, where on one side it is your current state or your primary, and on the other side is kind of that secondary or future state, kind of the desired thing. Change is actually that moment of sort of going over the edge of from whatever this current state is to the secondary state. And that moment or that act happens at so many different levels. It happens for us kind of as an individual, emotionally and cognitively, as well as then outwardly when we start behaving differently. That might happen if, Joanna, you and I were working as a pair on something and we wanted to do things differently. We both have our own individual journeys of change, but also the journey of us as a pair and how we change, and then at teams and organizational levels. So change management is the awareness and understanding of what is it that we're trying to create in the world, between an understanding and honoring that primary state we're in that has served us for whatever reasons it has, because that's where we are, and the where we want to be, meeting everyone, both as individuals and as nested systems, all the way through the organizational level, at where they are in relationship to that edge of change, and inviting them over. And unfortunately, I think very traditional, rigorous change management approaches often force people over the edge, or big plan up front, lead them over that edge in directive ways that cause damage, because we've all had those moments where we get thrust over an edge, whether it be in personal change sort of thing, like maybe we just got laid off or fired, or maybe our boss got laid off or fired, or the project we're working on got canceled, right? And it's like, oh, wow, I just went from here to there and I didn't have any control or buy-in for that, versus when it's like, oh, this is something I'm actually involved with and I can be part of it. So I think that way of thinking about change management and the edge concept and edge theory is a great way to visualize what it is we're trying to create in the world when we think about leading or managing change.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So could you please try to explain why this topic is important for teams, for companies, why companies are looking for expertise and potential opportunities, how to grow skills in the area of change.
Yeah, well, let's just look at the market economics around us, right? Every single day, um, there's new competitors entering the landscapes that we operate in, or how our customers are deriving value is changing, especially as agilists. For those of us that are in professional services, whether that be training and consulting services, being an agile coach, whatever you might want to call it, right? The influence of AI and how people are learning about Scrum and Agile, the influence of self-paced, self-serve learning, the larger market economics and conditions that change how organizations invest in procuring outside help for their teams and organizations. Like, those things are changing every single day. And so what we need to do as organizations is figure out how to create from what is changing and actually use the power of change as inertia to drive the direction we're going, versus come at it from this perspective of, oh, that is something I can put into a box and I can control it. So this is sort of that invitation to actually, the reason you need to learn more about change and how change influences people, teams, and organizations is not so that you can create a false narrative of managing it or mitigating how it's going to impact your organization. It's about understanding the science of change so you can harness that inertia and innovate and work from it versus react to and be more on the defensive side of the equation. And I think that's that higher calling that practitioners and leaders really need to be looking towards today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it naturally draws us to our next question, very important one. So can we truly manage change? And complementary question: what can be managed and what cannot?
Yeah, this is the thing we can control and the thing we can manage is how we as an individual show up and I would almost use the word react, but I don't want to use the word react. And so it's how, when change is happening or we know change is needed, how we show up as individuals is the thing that we can manage and control. And we can control our deliberate intention in how we create ground conditions for change that invite other people on whatever that journey is, so that there's greater organizational resiliency. And I think that is the thing that can be managed and controlled, how we're deliberate in the way we show up and behave and act, versus we cannot actually control what is happening in the world, or we cannot control how others will actually react. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the fallacy, is that if we follow this change management plan, then all these people over here will react and behave in these ways. And that is never actually true. That's the part you can't really manage.
That's so beautiful and so consistent with, I think, a lot of different domains that I was interested in, or I'm still interested in, right? In psychology, we say you don't force people. Actually, you cannot control others. What you can control is everything related to you. So you choose how you behave, you choose how do you want to have conversation, you choose what you say to your conversational partners. But everything outside you is like left with acceptance and with respect that others have their own choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason this dimension of it is so important is when you're working in an organization, and to just kind of put it on an extreme, like the leaders are freaking out because change is happening, mm-hmm. that does not inspire a generative approach to how we want to grow and change as an organization, right? This is about modeling the thing you want to be in the world and what you want to have happen. And there's a little bit of Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point in here, right? Especially when you think about larger systemic kind of organizational changes, you always have like your early first movers. You always have like those laggards and the late adopters that kind of feel more like they've got to be thrust over the edge or not, right? Maybe they need to exit the situation. But there is this tipping point that when enough people sort of on their own make the change, that will bring along others with them. And so much of real leadership and change, to your point, is more social sciences than it is kind of mathematics, I guess I'll say, from a contrast perspective. There's not like a formula you follow that will make it happen. It really is the human dynamic. And I think where we make I guess, shortcomings in some of our approach to stuff is trying to meet people with logic when what they're doing is emotionally experiencing change. We'll use going from more traditional ways of working to more agile ways of working as an example, right? I'm a middle manager in an organization. You're telling me I have to give up control and let the teams decide how they want to work. Well, the way you compensate me, the way you incent me, what you have written down in my job description tells me I need to control and manage and do all of these things. So then what am I intrinsically valued for in this company? And if you're not meeting me on those emotional levels, I'm going to be more resistant to whatever that shift is. And so I love that you bring in more of that psychology side of it. And where I've done I told the story of my early exposure to like why I thought change was interesting and maybe had thoughts about it, but not the frames or the models to describe it within. I really started geeking out a lot more in this social relationship aspect of change when I went through ORSC training, and ORSC is Organization and Relationship Systems Coaching from CRR Global. And that really gives you the vocabulary and the mental models and different tools to think about how you meet people where they are, identify them on that edge, and work with them on whatever that change is. Whether it's a change they want for themselves because you're in a true coaching situation, or it's a more desired organizational shift or required organizational shift because of something going on in the dynamics or how we want to intentionally change our business strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my next question is, I feel like you are emphasizing the lot that we need a change in the vocabulary, right? So not change management, because it's impossible to manage it, but change fluency instead, right?
Yes, that is the phrase.
Yeah. So this is the phrase that we should start using. And at the same time, accepting all the consequences, all the issues that we just discussed. So we decide to start thinking about fluency, change fluency, not change management. What becomes possible in your view when we do that shift and when we change our thinking?
Yeah, I'll just talk a little bit first about like why the word fluency, right? And we are all fluent in languages, or generally at least one. You, right? And maybe your listeners and followers know this, are fluent in many languages. I am not. But in the way that we are fluent in language, I invite everybody to really think about what happens and what is possible when you think about being fluent in change in the same way. So as the bedrock underneath your feet is continuously shifting, do you have that balance and the resiliency to move along with it? And just keep going versus every time that footing underneath you shifts, you're tripping and you're falling down. You're like, oh, we must fortify and we must like steel ourselves to withstand whatever the thing that is happening. And I think that steeling ourselves and that kind of tensing up defensive approach is very ingrained in us from the industrial age and the industrial ways of thinking, when it was so much about efficiency and repeatability and stuff like that. But in this digital era, when the pace of change just in technology evolution by itself is so vastly faster than it was even just 5 years ago, if we don't build those skills, we're going to hold ourselves back from innovation. Finding autonomy in organizations to allow decision making the closest to where the work is happening becomes a lot harder because of this false belief to plan and predict. Like, if I just do this thing, then that will be the outcome. And that is kind of the inherent held belief that has to be let go of. So what becomes possible when you're living in a not change management, but you've crossed the edge and you're living in a change fluency sort of state, is a much more generative, creative kind of abundance mindset than necessarily a scarcity mindset here, because this thing is happening in front of us and it's like, given what is here, what's our next best decision? Is your natural best place to go versus that kind of retrospective of, well, what happened that got us here? And we know as agilists, right, retrospectives and that word are for the importance of what has happened and what's going on and what the next best thing we want to do. But I think we can often live in a world of where retrospectives feel much more like those traditional, like, post-mortems at the end of a big project. Like, let's go point fingers and blame at all of the things that got us here. And so I really find myself almost repulsed now when I'm in a conversation with a group of people and we're trying to figure out the next, like, what needs to happen because of a situation. And we spend 45 minutes of the hour digging through the past. I'm like, it doesn't really matter. We are here in this moment. What do we want to create from where we are in order to go forward? And so it really is a place of change fluency is about action and motion and taking steps and incremental learning, versus a more change management approach is a more steely, kind of take where you're like, if we fortify this and structure it in such a way, we're actually decreasing our resiliency and our ability to change, I think. And so it's like, language matters, words matter. Just by calling it change management implies it is something we can manage and control. Calling it change fluency puts us in a different mental position that frees us from some of those unconscious psychological trappings. I know that was a little all over the place in that description, but I hope it's kind of landing with people in terms of everything is different about change fluency and nothing is different at the same time. It's like the day you get married. Nothing is the same, yet everything is different, right? Or nothing has changed, yet everything is different at exactly the same time. Nothing is fundamentally different, but what becomes possible is the thing that's different.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It reminds me about that when we choose different words, we may expect different things and create some false assumptions or false promises. Just one example from our common field. Let's do agile transformation, 1 year plan, what will be expected to achieve, what are the milestones, and after 1 year, we will become agile, right? So yeah, I feel like internal disagreement, but it's a path. It's not a final point somewhere, right? And now we try to stick it to a project in the traditional project management way, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just even like you think about changes in the Scrum Guide and words that go from like ceremonies to events, right? Ceremonies can lead themselves to more, and I'll use a phrase Marty Kagan has been using lately, more things like product management theater. And I use it
Mhm.
like it's theater, it's an act, it's a show, it's not the real thing happening. And ceremony can lend itself a little bit more to like show and display and all of this versus an event is like a real thing that's happening and you're doing the stuff in it. So like that's just another example of like the words we use matter because they have emotional connection and so many embedded meanings, and that is a little different in every single culture, right? So which is part of like understanding who you're working with and meeting them where they are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Not to mention the fact that I recently read some articles that happy people choose a little different vocabulary than those unhappy ones, statistically, of course. So, yeah, seems like language indeed matters, right? And we have
It does.
yet another example of that. So after that amazing answers and our discussion so far, uh, what would you say to our audience about their potential journey? So I'm looking for some simple one step they can take in that journey when it comes to agile agile fluency. I wanted to say, well, it is
It
actually,
is. Yeah,
it
it is.
is. Change fluency.
Yeah, the there's a little bit in, you know, in addition to the work I do at Scrum.org, I also serve as the president of an organization called Women in Agile. And so spending time and space in that diversity, equity, and inclusion area is also something that I spend quite a lot of time on. And when there's this talk that I give around diversity starts with I,
Hmm.
from that perspective of if I cannot be with myself and allow diversity of thought, my ability to create the space for diversity around me is impeded. And so this concept of change fluency very much starts with I as well. And it is maybe something as simple as just 3 to 5 minutes every single day sitting and reflecting. You may take it as far as journaling or just to like, I'm going to get up and walk around the block once or sit on my sofa with a cup of tea and just think about like, what are the changes that I experienced today, whether I instigated them myself or that they
Hmm.
were kind of thrust upon me. How did I show up to those? Where do I notice my own internal resistance to change and getting in touch with that? Because the more you're aware of the types of change and ways that you experience change in your own resistance to them, the more we experience, and it's often a very somatic thing, which I get feels very woo woo, but it goes to exactly what you were saying a minute ago, Joanna, around like happier people show up in the world and use different language. The more we are experiencing those body and emotional somatic sort of feelings towards resistance, the more we're going to show up in defensive and scarcity mindset ways. So understanding those types of things and when it's happening to you, slowing down that thought process in order to slowly build the muscles to say, okay, I'm aware that's happening, and get into more of a, and so what am I going to do about this versus how am I going to brace and defense myself against it, is a lot easier said than done. But that is, I believe, the single place to start with yourself. And once you get there, or sometimes it's easier to do with others than it is to do with yourself, noticing that resistance in others and checking in and asking what's going on, resisting that urge to unpack all of the what got us here and focus on the future and that bias towards action. So like, I think those are like that noticing in yourself, getting curious about when you see the resistance in others, resisting that urge to unpack the past and look towards that action of future, are all little things to do that can help you be more in that space of fluency than management. And if you really want to geek out on some of this, like I said, Arnie Mendel's work on edge theory is a great place to start. The ORSC training has content around ground conditions for change that I think are really important. One of the headlines from some of that is summarized in a popular African proverb is not the right word. Fable is not the right word. I don't know the right word for it, but it's the statement is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that is the piece of change management creates a false sense of confidence around, we can plan this out and it can go fast. That agile transformation can happen in 12 months. If we want to go far, we go together. That is much more about the human relationship system of how are we with each other and what needs to happen. Because at the end of the day, a company is nothing more than a piece of paper filed and registered with some government entity that allows it to exist. It is nothing more than a name on some paper. And it's not even probably physical paper anymore. It's just in some weird database somewhere. The company really is the collection of humans that bring that mission to life every single day. And so being in that space of change management is absolutely more human biased than it is processes and tools, right? If we kind of give a little bit of a counterbalance in the same way that we talk about the Agile Manifesto. So those were a couple concrete tools as well as invitations to go kind of learn a little bit more deeply about some of this stuff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Definitely useful, and I've learned new things, so I'm super happy. As I typically say, I'm a little selfish, because I'm inviting people that I believe can teach me something interesting and broaden my perspective. So I'm bringing my curiosity and asking tough questions. So thank you very much for that. That was a pleasure to
Thank you
have
for
you
having
here.
me. Yeah, I so appreciate it. It's fun, especially for me. We happen to be recording this early-ish on a Monday Eastern time in the US where I live. So getting to sit in this space with you and think about something that sort of gets the fire in my belly going at the beginning of the week is beautiful. So thank you, Joanna, for having me today.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. I'm happy to hear that. And I'm looking forward for our future conversations, because, I'll be back. I'll be back.
I love it. Please do.
Thank you. And to finish our conversations, because we have a little strange tradition, we have to choose the hashtag for today. So Leslie, would you like to choose a hashtag that our viewers, our audience should put into the comments?
I mean, it seems wrong to not have it just be hashtag change fluency, right? The more people see that word, the more they might get curious, the more they might start thinking about what it means for them.
Thank you very much. So hashtag change fluency, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.